Good morning. Good morning. Oh, there we are. How are you all this morning? Good. It feels a little quieter here this morning, but I think a lot of people are out with their families and celebrating elsewhere. I hope each one of you had a really good Thanksgiving filled with rest, family, friends, and lots of food. I love the food. It's my favorite part. And the family, of course. Today in our community, we have so many things to be thankful for. And there's a lot of different ways to give back. And so I was looking through the announcements, and one of the things tonight that you could do is give back with your time. Tonight at 5 p.m. here, we're going to be decorating the fellowship hall and then the angel tree. And if you have questions, you can find Michelle. That's 5 p.m. tonight. And then December 5 at 6:30, we have another decorating time of the sanctuary and the foyer for Christmas time. And then there are a lot of other announcements, but the one that is kind of the one coming up that's out of the typical announcements or things happening in the calendar is December 8. We have the women's ministry Christmas tea and cookies at 1 p.m. in our fellowship hall. And for any of the other announcements, you can look in our handy bulletin. There are lots of things going on. And one of the other ways outside of time is giving financially. So I was looking at offering today for the announcements with the offering, and I didn't know what NPUC meant, so I had to Google. I had to Google a couple things actually. So the NPUC stands for the North Pacific Union Conference, and so today's offering is for the Alaskan portion of our NPUC. And I was looking at different things that they do, and I asked Debbie if there was a video, and there was not. So Google again was my friend. And one of the things they had is the Arctic Mission. Is it AMA? When I saw AMA, I thought it meant against medical advice, and I said, we don't support that. AMA is the Arctic Missions Adventure, and so it supports people in the Arctic where there's a lot of different communities that are farther apart. And so this mission supports 8 different communities, giving Bible studies, day camps, and then also helping with the food pantries. So if you're able and willing, giving in our support of this would be really helpful. So please, now if the deacons could stand. Take our offering. And let's bow our heads to pray. Dear Father, thank you for this wonderful end of our November with Thanksgiving and time to celebrate together, to worship you and to give back to you and to people in our community. Lord, I ask that you bless the Alaska Conference and all of the things that they do with the people in the community up there. Please bless each one of these people today and help us to consider giving. In your name, amen.
I hope you all, let's have the children's story and all the children pick up a basket in the back. See someone waving some money. Get them for a good cause. Right down over there. Mommy, wow. Okay, that's awesome. How about you guys? You guys are so awesome. Praise the Lord for those thankfulness. You know, the one thing I am thankful for is a lot of things. One, for a friend who's helped me go through the journey. He's been really good. Another thing, peace and quiet in the house. That's for sure. Peace and quiet is good. Always give thanks. Huh? Sorry, what? Hey, good. So my thing was, I say, things I don't understand, or we don't understand what God's will is, we always give thanks. And the thing is, I've learned that it's hard to understand what God is saying in the midst of a storm, good or bad, we don't know, but in all things give thanks. I'd like to read a little scripture. You may know it, maybe not. Give all thanks always and for everything to God the Father, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Not be anxious about anything, but in everything, prayer and supplication, thanksgiving, let your request here be known to God, and the God has all understood your hearts, minds. Just remember, go back home, mom or your dad or anybody, they tell you something, you don't like it, thank the Lord for it. So you go back to your seats.
Good morning. As you see, I brought reinforcement. Actually, I might be the reinforcement. Let's open our hymnals to number 1. Praise to the Lord. First, second, and last stanzas. Number 99. 99. Third stanza. All you may need, He will provide. God will take care of you. Nothing you ask will be denied. God will take care of you. God will take care of you every day or all the way. He will take care of you. God will take care of you. Last stanza. No matter what may be the test, God will take care of you. will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will take care of you. God will take care of you. Turn the page to 100. First and last stanza. Great is thy faithfulness, O God our Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever wilt be. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Pardon for sin, the peace that endureth. Thy own dear presence to cheer and to guide. Strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Great is thy faithfulness, thy Son. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Thank you. And I don't have to tell you to be seated.
For our family prayer, so if you would like, you can either stay seated or you may kneel. And as people are getting settled, I wanted to share a quote on thankfulness. You can kneel if you'd like to. By Max Lucado. He's a Christian author, and he said about gratitude. Gratitude lifts our eyes off of the things we lack so we might see the blessings that we possess. And I think that's a really great thing to think on during this Thanksgiving time. You can please bow your heads. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for this beautiful sunny day today. Please bless each one of the people here and our online community. Bless each person and their families, anyone that's hurting. Lord, I ask that you give people peace today, a respite from pain and hurting, and I ask that you be with each person here as they listen to Kirk preach the message today. Please be with Kirk, guide his words, and help each one of us gain a blessing and think about all of the things that there are to be thankful for in this life. In your name.
Morning. morning, everyone. Happy Sabbath. Good to see all of you this morning. I hope you enjoyed some Thanksgiving with all of your friends and family around you. Some of you, I'm sure, had wonderful Thanksgiving. Some had awkward Thanksgivings. You can all remember some of those. I'm just glad to be with you this morning. I'm sure we have some visitors with us, so welcome. I'm glad you're here. I'm not the regular, so be not afraid. You come back some other time, you might see someone else. So welcome, glad you're here. An online community, thank you for joining us this morning. Happy Sabbath to all of you. I'm excited to share with you this morning. Let's bow our heads for a word of prayer, and then let's jump into it. Father, thank you so much for the opportunity to spend some time thinking about you, thinking about what you've done in the past and what you're doing for us in the future. We just want to thank you for all the blessings you've given. A long time ago, when Christine and I first got married, we decided we were going to move to Colorado. So we're just married. We decided we want to be independent, we want to be on our own. I'm sure a lot of you experienced this. And you first get married, there's always the parents who decide things. And it's like, let's just get away from that. We'll go to Colorado. We'll be our own couple for a while. It'll be great. So Christine was very industrious. She called places, had interviews lined up, and we showed up. And the day we arrived, I should say the next day we arrived, she went to her first interview, got the job, canceled the rest of her interviews, and went to work the next day. I, on the other hand, tried to line up as many jobs opportunities as I could and just could not find work. So what I ended up doing after a few weeks of looking for work, I decided, well, at least what I can do is I'll go to our local school. Went to our local Adventist school there in Erie, Colorado, and I said, can I be a substitute teacher? And as any school will tell you, especially Livingston Baptist Academy, the answer is yes. Yes, you can. Yes, you are welcome to come and substitute. Just pass a background check. Come sub for us anytime. So they said yes, and so I subbed for every grade imaginable. It was a K through 10th, and so I subbed for 10th grade and 6th grade and 4th grade and 5th grade, and I taught all kinds of different subjects. And then finally I came and I subbed for kindergarten. And if you sub for any grades, all children are wonderful and beautiful, but if you sub for kindergarten, it's a different kind of experience. There's just something about the way that kindergartners are, that subbing for them, there's a routine they're looking for, there's a regularity they're looking for. And so when I started to sub, I had a list. The teacher had given me exactly what to do and how to do it. And I started going through, and there's this one little boy who would constantly interrupt me. I can't remember his name. I'm going to call him Tim for now. But Tim would interrupt me, and he would say, that's not how teachers do. Over and over again. And I finally had to stop Tim, and I said, Tim, today is going to be a different kind of... And he just had to reorient his entire reality, to think about it for a little bit. And I could see him, every time I would do something different that day, you'd see him, he would literally mouth it to himself, today's a different day. It was his mantra the entire day. Even the recess was slightly the wrong time, or was a little bit longer than it was supposed to be, or I tried to teach kindergartners math, which was a really bad idea. No, I shouldn't do that. He would say, today is going to be a different kind. The following rules and directions is sometimes difficult for us. God, at the very beginning of time, gave us some directives. He told us some things. Here's what you should do. He created the entire world, and he took Adam and Eve and said, here's some things I want you to do. And sometimes for us, following those rules can be difficult. Sometimes we're like little Tim. We have to say, today's going to be a different kind. Today's going to be different. What I want to do this morning is look at a few stories in Genesis. We're going to look at Adam and Eve, their fall briefly, and then Noah. And then I want to end and talk a little bit about the Tower of Babel. That's kind of where we're going to lead to. And just talk about what is God doing when we mess up, when we make mistakes. Is he doing something to punish us? Is he doing a curse? Is he cursing us? Or is it an act of mercy? Is that what he's doing? Let's take a look. So we'll start with Genesis 1, the very beginning there. Genesis 1, in creation, God creates the entire world in 6 days. And at the end of the 6th day, he creates Adam and Eve. And he gives us this. This is chapter 1, Genesis chapter 1, 26. Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, the creepy things on the earth. So God created them in his own image. In his image, God created them. Male and female, he created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, here's their command, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, over every living thing that moves on the earth. So God creates them and he gives them these three tasks. Be fruitful and multiply, fill the whole earth, and have dominion over it. That seems easy. That seems like a nice life. I like that. Creates them and gives them these three things. Unfortunately for us, it didn't last very long. We don't know how long they were in the Garden of Eden. Most scholars would tell you that creation was roughly 4000 BC, give or take. The Jewish calendar actually specifically says it's 4004 BC. I want to get real exact. They were probably in the garden for a few months, I would guess, maybe no more than a year. And then, unfortunately, the fall occurs. And in the fall, Eve comes to this tree and is deceived by a serpent. She gives the apple to Adam. Adam eats the apple knowingly, and they both sin and fall short. God looks for them in the garden, can't find them, calls out to them, and they finally admit, we've done something we should. What's interesting is when God finally confronts them, rather than admitting what they've done, they blame God. Remember, Adam says, "This woman you created for me." Ooh, that's a little harsh. And then Eve does the exact same thing. She says, no, it was this serpent that you created, God. God, it's your fault that we fell. And then what happens to us next is God has these lists of what some people would refer to as curses in chapter 3. God curses them, depending on how you read it. He says this in chapter 3, we're in verse 16. It says, "And I will greatly multiply your sorrows and your conception. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you." Thus to the woman he says this, "Desire of your husband, and pain will be multiplied in childbirth." I think it's kind of interesting, just a side note. It's fascinating to me that its pain is multiplied, not that there will be pain, which means, was there pain before the fall? I think that's kind of interesting to think about. Then Adam, he said, "Because you have heeded the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it, cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, and for dust you are, and for dust you shall." God gives them what some would call a curse. I curse the ground. But here's a question. What were God's options when Adam and Eve? There's a couple options you can think of. One, he could have just wiped them out and started over. That's easy to do. He's God. That's no problem. I can wipe them out. I can start over. The other option is he could have kicked them out of the garden and made a new Adam and Eve and put them in the garden, and again started over, and he still could have had the salvation process for Adam and Eve. They could have lived out their lives outside the garden. Not a big deal. But instead, he chooses to kick them out of the garden and continue to abide with them. I would argue that God doing the things he did is an act of mercy, rather than a curse for them. He didn't do it to punish them per se. Now, there's natural consequences. Every time we sin, when we do something wrong, there are consequences. There are things that happen naturally. When I get in a car accident, my insurance rates go up. It's a natural consequence, unfortunately, of things that happen. But God does things specifically, I think, for our good. Good to reread the text and ask ourselves, well, why did God ask man to go toil in the soil? I like how that sounds. Why did God ask us to go toil in the soil? Why did he ask us to do things in the soil? Now, from a male perspective, I'll just tell you, most of us are defined by what we do. The most difficult thing for a man, when I was unemployed in Colorado for a few weeks, the most difficult thing for me to say to people is, what do you do? I do nothing. I currently have no vocation. I have an education and no vocation. That's really hard. So giving males especially a task and saying, your job is to go into the field and dig it up and plant herbs and grow those herbs and eat those herbs. That's your job. That gives us purpose. Idle hands are the devil's playthings. You heard that before? We already misbehaved once. Let me give you something to do so you don't misbehave. So God does something, I think, for our purpose. I would say it's an act of mercy. Here's something. Well, not long after Adam and Eve, they're in the garden for we don't know how long, a few months, maybe a year. Again, around 4000 BC. For about 1500 years, there's this experiment. Adam and Eve have children, Cain and Abel occurs, and the world just gets worse and worse and worse. And finally, God says, after about 1500 years, he calls Noah and he says, it's time to try again. I am going to wipe out everybody on earth. I'm going to recreate the world, and you are my designated. So if you know the story, Noah builds an ark. It takes him roughly 120 years. There are some scholars that disagree with that number, but somewhere in that range, it takes him a very long time to build something. If any of us took 120 years to build something, it would be our grandchildren or great-grandchildren who finish it, right? So it's a long time for him to work on this thing. And he builds this boat out of faith, and he sails it, kind of, sort of. It's more of a, there's a lot of tossing and turning. Maybe sail's a strong term. He gets into it with all the animals and his sons and their wives, and when they finally finish a year later and land the boat, he gets out of the boat, and there's this beautiful moment of thankfulness. As a sacrifice, thanks God for everything. It's so wonderful and it's so beautiful. And then God comes and gives him this command. Okay, we're in the wrong one. We are in chapter 9. Chapter 9. And we're in verse 1. And God blessed Noah, chapter 9, verse 1, his sons, and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast on the earth, every bird of the air, and all that move on the earth, and all the fish of the sea. They are given into your hand. So notice that he gives them this command. Adam and Eve, it was be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and have dominion. But notice there's one missing now. The be fruitful and fill the earth are still there, but it's no longer have dominion over the earth. They kind of lost the privilege of having dominion. In fact, now the animals are no longer going to come to you like a Bambi or something, coming up to you. They're going to be running from you. They're going to fear for you. They're not going to be near you. They're actually going to attack you. There's going to be a problem, actually, in many ways. But they're still given this task. I need you to be fruitful. I need you to be multiplied. For God to do what he wanted to do on this earth, he wanted it to be filled with people, and he wanted there to be as many as possible. Kind of interesting. That's kind of fascinating. So, Noah lives for another about 300 years after the flood. Like I said, the flood's about 2500 BC, so 1500 years after creation. And we don't know exactly how long it is from Noah to the Tower of Babel. There are some that say 100 years. I think it's a little short for growth rates and birth rates and things. I think it's more like 250, maybe 300 years after the flood. Because there's roughly 20 to 30,000 people on the earth, is my estimate, roughly, when you get to the Tower of Babel. There's a significant number of people around the earth. By the time you get to Abraham, there's probably 2 or 3 million people. So the growth rate lines up pretty well. If you think about 200 maybe years after the flood, you've got several thousand people on the earth. And they decide, we are going to build our own town. We're going to build it in opposition to God. Let's read their story. This is chapter 11. 1 through 9 is the Tower of Babel. Remember, we were just told, Noah was told, hey, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, spread everywhere. And here are the people of the Tower of Babel. Let's read. Now the whole earth and one language and one speech. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar. And they dwelt there. They said to one another, come, let us build bricks and bake them thoroughly. They had brick for stone and there's asphalt for mortar. And they said, come, let us build ourselves a city, a tower, whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves. Let us not be scattered, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole. So first, they clearly are going against God's command. God said, be fruitful, multiply, fill the whole earth. And they purposely said, we don't want to do the spreading part. We want to stay together. We want to congregate. We want to be. So right there, they're saying, no, we don't want to do this. Verse 5, but the Lord came down to the city, to see the city, and the tower which the sons of men had built. And the Lord said, indeed, the people are one, and they have one language. And this is what they begin to do. Now nothing they purpose to do will be withheld from them. Come, let us go down there and confuse their language, and they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth. They ceased building the city. Therefore its name is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth. From there the Lord scattered them abroad for all the face. A couple things to keep in mind. We had the flood that occurred not that long ago, a few hundred years before this occurred. The flood caused some interesting effects on the earth. There's a lot of water. You've got to deal with a lot of water. Obviously, the flood moved around continents. It created valleys where there are no valleys. It created mountains where there are no mountains. It really kind of disrupted the entire world. But one problem you had is if the ark lands somewhere in the Middle East area, we need to get people and we need to get animals throughout the entire earth. And there are places like Australia that are difficult to get to. There are places even from there to try and get to the United States, trying to get North America, South America. There's no land bridge now. So what likely occurred is after the flood, you would have warm oceans, which then would evaporate, and they would bring down snow and ice on cold areas, so like the northern hemisphere, southern areas, anywhere it was cold. So likely a mini ice age occurred after the flood. We don't know how long it lasted precisely, but huge amounts of water were accumulated and sat on the earth. So much water such that the earth's seas dropped significantly. Some estimates are 100 feet, 120 feet. They dropped enough that you could have walked to most places on earth relatively easily. Now, there's some places that still would be difficult to get to. And there are other theories of how animals got to some of those places. But basically, God is working with a timeline here. He says, I need you to spread out. I need you to do it now. And the people said, no, I don't want to do it now. And God said, well, you're going to do it anyway, because the ice is going to melt, and at some point you won't be able to get to the places I need you to be. So God has this timeline in mind, so he comes down to the people, and he says, wow, they're not spreading out. So I'm going to confuse their language. And that seems like an odd thing to do, wouldn't you agree? What a weird thing to do. And I had to think about that for a little bit. I had a professor I talked to at Engine University. He was asking the question, what was the purpose of confusing the language? I mean, we have purpose for a lot of the things God does. When he corrects us, he kind of has something for us to do, right? So when he corrected Adam and Eve, he said, I need you to toil. It was to build our character, it was to work on something. What about confusing the language? That just seems like an odd thing to do. There's a couple things that are happening there. The first, I think, is interesting, is that they're being cut off from a source of knowledge. Noah spoke the same language as they did. Noah lived before the flood. Noah met some pretty interesting people before the flood. Noah would have seen the Garden of Eden, not in it obviously, but he'd seen it. He'd seen the angels standing next to the gates. He would probably talk to many of the, he wouldn't have talked to Adam necessarily. Adam would have died before he was born, but several, Methuselah for sure, Enoch for sure he would have talked to. He had some interesting knowledge. And he lived 300 years after the flood. So anyone could have interacted with Noah, and they could have taken in the knowledge that he had to offer. So they get cut off from Noah, no longer can talk to him. The other thing I think is interesting is I think God is jumping ahead in time and doing something that would have occurred anyway. So think about this for a moment. If you were to travel this country, if you stay in the United States and just traveled around, and let's say we go to Minnesota together, they're going to have a different accent than you and I. Do you agree? Maybe some of you are from Minnesota. I don't want to insult you. I think it's a wonderful accent. You go to New York, completely different accent. In fact, they have words there that I don't even understand. I don't know how they talk. They say certain things that I don't know what that word means. If you go to Alabama, I've got friends live in Alabama. There are some people I can't understand at all. You know, that's not the insult to them. It's just they have a different dialect now. I listened to an interview once from someone from Ireland who supposedly was speaking English, and I couldn't understand a word they were saying. And the point being is that peoples, if you separate different people from different areas, and they go to different locations, naturally, language evolves, occurs, develops. So what if God wasn't just saying, I'm going to make language just like randomly? He's saying, what I'm going to do is language is going to develop naturally anyway. So I'm going to skip a step. Rather than you diversifying and language occurring, I'll create language, and then you'll disperse across the world, which is essentially what happened. They started talking together. They couldn't speak together, so they grouped themselves together in natural language groups, and then they dispersed that way, which is kind of interesting. So what if God kind of did one before the other? I think that's kind of fascinating. And language is interesting anyway. Every language is uniquely complex. I know some of you probably speak multiple languages, and you probably can understand different people in different places. But you'll notice that every language has its own barriers. Some people say, oh, this is the hardest language to learn, or this is the hardest language to learn. But all of them are very difficult in their own unique way. Whether it's the sounds you have to make with your voice, whether it's the complexity of number of characters, or one character next to one character makes a certain sound, like in English is just crazy. We tell our kids I before E, and yet there are more words that have E before I in the English language. What are we doing? It's ridiculous. So language is complex, and it's interesting and fascinating. One idea, too, is what if God came down when he developed language and made language, and he purposely made language, what if he gave each language something different, something unique? What if each language has its own piece of God in it? Every culture and language has its own understanding of who God is. If you were to talk to Native Americans that were here hundreds of years ago, they would tell you that there is a great spirit. I'm sure you've heard wonderful Indian stories. They'll tell you there's a great spirit. Maybe it's a wolf spirit, maybe it's a buffalo, maybe it's a deer, but God is this great spirit. He's this big thing. He envelops things. And if you talk to a Westerner, though, if you talk to someone from Europe, God is a monarch. God is a dictator. God is a lord. We have a different view of who God and what God is. If you look at the Jewish people, they think of God as breath. In fact, the word Yahweh, you've heard this before probably, the word Yahweh is the breathing in, Yahweh. Breath is God. In fact, they wouldn't even say the name of God. They wouldn't even write the full name of God. Most of them would write the Y and the W, and that was that, or if that. And they write it often in a different color even. They had a different thinking of who God was. In fact, for the Jewish people, mind, body, and soul were one. There was not a word for them particularly. They were all the same. They were together. Often in our Bible, we tend to translate it differently as soul or mind or body. But the Jewish didn't think that way. They thought as one thing. In fact, when they thought of soul, they thought of your throat area. I know soul for me is always like in your internal organ somewhere. I don't know why, but somehow it's in here. But for them, it was the throat. Right? In their culture, they did a lot of sacrificing, right? What would they do when they sacrificed? Well, they cut the throat. Soul. Now, if you go to the Greeks split up mind, body, and soul. They put it all in different pieces, and they would have philosophy only dedicated just to this piece of the mind or the body or whatever it was. If you looked at the Greek gods, their gods have human attributes. They would they would do very bad things. Let me put it that way. They were not nice people. But every culture has their own understanding of God, their own way of thinking about God. And what if God, when he created language, he gave each culture a different of what it was to be God to think about? Wouldn't that be fascinating? I love it looking at different cultures. Sometimes you'll run into a culture who doesn't have a word for something in your language. Tropics especially, if you go to the tropics and bring them back to the United States, they don't have a word for snow because they've never seen snow. Isn't that interesting? Because culture and language develop based on where you lived. If for you it was normal not to have snow and normal to have 70 degrees all the time, every day, all day, you wouldn't need a word for cold even. Wouldn't that be interesting? On a cold November day. But this language, what if learning language, what if thinking about language actually helps us learn more about God? I'm going to ask you this question, and I'll try to answer it with a verse in Revelation in just a moment. But what about this? Do you think when we go to heaven that we will all speak the same? I mean, God created language. Do you think he'll just eliminate it when we go to heaven? I think that's kind of interesting. to think about, isn't it? Let's read Revelation really quick. Just for you, something to think about, something to consider. I'm not saying this is necessarily the case. I'm not saying you should bank on the fact that you have to go to heaven now, you got to learn a bunch of languages so you can speak to people. But how cool would it be if we did? If you look at Revelation 7, verse 9, Revelation 7, verse 9, just an idea, just a thought. It says, "After these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude, which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues." Notice the word tongues there, standing before the throne, before the Lamb. Well, if you've said a great multitude, numbers from all nations, all tribes, all peoples, why say the word tongues? That's interesting. What if, this is a fun idea, what if you went to heaven and you found Noah, since we're talking about Noah, you found Noah, you see him, for some reason you can recognize him. I think every patriarch after Adam had a beard for some reason. Every one of our books. Notice Adam is clean shaven. Everybody else has a beard. Just notice that when you read your next children's story. So you're going to look for Noah. He's got the longest beard possible for some reason. And you go to Noah and you say hello to him and you start asking him questions, and he speaks back in a different language. Like, oh, now what do I do? What about this? What if instead of going and peppering questions, you get answers? Now you get to spend time with Noah learning his language. Or him learning your language. Have you guys ever met someone that doesn't speak the same language as you and had to have those awkward moments where you're kind of like doing hand motions and signals and saying words louder for some reason? Have you guys ever done that? I feel like a dummy when I do this, but I'll say a word louder. It's like, no, it doesn't help them. They don't know what language you're speaking. And so you're sitting with Noah and you're just like gesturing. And remember, you have all of eternity. There's not dinner at 5. You can sit with Noah for 100 years, get to think about him. What if eternity, what if heaven's about slowing things down a little bit and meeting some wonderful people of history, learning their language? Because remember, in heaven, what will you be doing? We're going to spend our eternity, the Bible tells us eternity, learning more about God. What if there are other things we get to learn? And what if language is one of those things? But imagine you're going to travel to another world and meet another people created in a different way, and you get to start building relationships with them and thinking about them and learning their language and their customs and what life is like on their planet. How cool is that going to be? So what if language is going to be so important? God created it. God made it. What if it's still available to us? Just a thought exercise, something I was thinking about the other day, thinking, what if I get to sit with Noah and learn? What if as we learn language here on earth, that we're actually learning something about who God is? Now, every language and culture has negative aspects, and there's parts of English language I don't use, for many of you do too. Like, it's not everything's appropriate. I'm not saying everything should be consumed by us. But what if learning another language, whether it's Spanish or German or French or whatever it might be, language teaches you something about who God is and who we are as a people? Some of my favorite missionary stories are when missionaries go to a place, they move there, they live with the community, they learn their language, they learn their customs, they learn their culture, and then they begin to interact with them about Jesus, about God, about the Bible, using their own language, using their own customs, their own ideas. There's this cool organization, I wish I remember the name of it, but what they do is they rewrite the Bible stories in a way that a culture can understand. So they'll take like 15, 20 of the most well-known biblical stories. They'll go to a culture, they'll learn their language, and then they'll write the story, something that can be verbally given by missionaries, in a way that they can understand. They might change some of the words, some of the ideas, some of the concepts. For example, they may not say the ark, they might say something like a giant canoe. I mean, something to help them understand what's happening. I just love the idea that we can show people love and care and goodness by learning who they are. Like next time we share the gospel, let's share it in a way that says, hey, we care about you. Rather than me saying, you should learn some English and then I can teach you about God. No. What if I learned their language, learned what their culture is, learned what their life is like, and tried to relate God? God is like, notice whenever Jesus would say something, whenever you do a parable, it's like the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. What if instead you went to Washington and you were going to share the gospel and you said, the kingdom of heaven is like an apple seed? A lot of apples in it. What if you went to the tropics and said, the kingdom of God is like a coconut? What if God uses all of these ideas that are culturally relevant. And so what if we use language in a way that could be culturally relevant to others? And it draws us together because the Bible tells us that we're this one body. We're this one group of people. Part of our language for God is connecting with other people, loving other people, drawing them close. We can be thankful today that God created language, created peoples, and created a way for us to interact with each other and love each other and spend time together. I think personally that learning language helps slow down our relationships, helps slow down an interaction so you can actually get to know. I have the opportunity to go down to Costa Rica every year, and I don't know very much Spanish. I'm trying to learn some, but I always am fascinated when we get to sit down with someone and spend time together, and there's half the conversation we don't hear each other because we're speaking different languages. But there's just this chance to spend time with someone, to understand them, to try and understand their culture. Because you might learn Spanish, for example, to go to Costa Rica, but then you got to learn Spanish for Costa Rica. They have different words, they have different ways they pronounce things, they have different ways of speaking, and then to learn how they're living, so you understand how their language relates to the way they live, and how they perceive the Bible because of the way they live. Through this one people. Let's get a few more verses for you, and then we can go have some lunch. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 28. The last section there, it tells us, God gives us the next thing. Remember, it was supposed to be, we're going to be fruitful or multiply, fill the earth, have dominion. And Jesus gives us the Great Commission and gives us a different goal, something new to look at. Chapter 28, this is the last thing Jesus says before he leaves. This is all authority. This is verse 18. All authority has been given in heaven and on earth. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always. So he still wants us to spread out. He still wants us to be fruitful and multiply in the sense that we are now supposed to be spreading the gospel, not just to English speakers, everyone, everywhere. We're one body now, one group. We're going to be in John chapter 13, one more here, actually two more. John chapter 13. And new commandment he gives us, this is verse 34. He says, a new commandment I give to you, this is Jesus speaking, a new commandment I give to you, love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love, and love to be caring for each other. What matters to someone next to you? We so often live in a world where what matters to us is most important. And whatever we can do to make sure the thing that we want to happen happens, that's what matters to us. Unfortunately, we manipulate people sometimes. We say things we probably shouldn't say to other people. What if we thought, I wonder what they want? I wonder what they need. I wonder what's important to them. All right, I'll give you one last verse. I'll get out of your hair. We're in Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 4. I'm getting hungry. We got to finish this up. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 1. It says, therefore, the prisoner of the Lord beseech thee to walk worthy and calling you each where you're called. Verse 2, with all loneliness and gentleness, with long suffering, bearing with one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body, there is one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope of your calling. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is above all, in one people. I know at Tower of Babel we were split apart into a bunch of different fractured things. But someday, God's going to call us all together at once when he comes again. And I'd like to be ready for that day. I'd like to get to know the people around me from different cultures, different backgrounds, different areas, and learn what they have to teach me about who God is. That way, when I go to heaven, I can go with Noah and I can sit with him and I can learn his language and learn what God did. I just want to pray as we're today, as we're being thankful for people around us, for our family members, maybe for our neighbors. Let's take a few moments. Let's find someone maybe we don't know very well in our neighborhood and learn about who they are. Let's bow our heads for Father, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for your guidance and your protection, God, and thank you for the gift of language, for the gift of all the different people around the world. Lord, you are working in every language and every culture and every people on earth. Your Spirit is moving, and we want to pray that we'll heed the call. God, as someone comes near us, as you bring someone to our orbit, that we get to share you, learn about that, learn more about who you are by getting to know someone. Thank you, Lord. Amen.